Hi, my name is Joy, and this is my first video. And today, I would like to talk about differences between Android and iOS. Let's start with something more basic. Um, let's talk about the securities. Now, both these devices have different softwares and hardware equipments used to increase the securities of the user. One of the most basic tools that is used by both these platforms is a fingerprint sensor. Now, Nexus devices, those are devices which are mainly created by Google, have great sensors. Like in 2015's devices are Nexus 5X and Nexus 6P. These are devices which Google made in collaboration with Huawei and LG. Both have beautiful fingerprint sensors that work really well. But when we compare them with the fingerprint sensor of iPhones, that is in software terms, which is called Touch ID, they are not as good as iPhone's Touch ID because the Touch ID's speed is much faster in comparison to that of Androids. But there are different devices under Android's platform which compete quite well with Apple's iPhone 6s's fingerprint sensor. Like for example, Samsung's S7 sensor is quite good in comparison to the iPhone's sensor. Similarly, when we talk about data security, there is much more difference in that because iPhone's data security is much better and is much trustworthy in comparison to that of Android's, because there are lots and lots of vulnerabilities in Android's softwares. There are different kinds of issues. Similarly, even there are those issues in Apple software too, but Apple is much more stronger in terms of its data security because it has got much more software tools which it uses and which it works on to make security better in its devices. And in terms of data, it's easily said that Apple's software is much better in comparison to Android in securing data. But with Marshmallow, Android has worked quite hard by providing similar options of permissions and so on and so forth, like Apple does with its iOS softwares. But it has still got a long way to go to come to be as good as iOS in terms of data security. Now, let's talk about content sync. Syncing data is one of the most difficult tasks for a lot of people, but Android has made it quite easy because Google syncs all its data of all the data of a user to his or her Gmail account, and that's quite easy. So as soon as you sign into your Gmail account on an Android device, all the data just comes in, and that's quite easy. It is similar with Apple's devices too, with its iCloud accounts. But still, Apple has got lots and lots of issues because, first of all, one of the main issues is Apple's iCloud account of a user limits the user to access only a limited amount of data. That's quite less in comparison to that of what is provided by Google. Google provides lots of space in comparison to iOS specifically. So in terms of content syncing, Android is much better than Apple. But if we talk about syncing contact across devices, Apple is much better because Apple has a single platform that connects all the devices. So as soon as I take a photograph on my 6S here, it doesn't even take seconds for that photograph to go and sync into my Mac or on my iPad for that sake. So that's quite good on iOS devices. But for that, the problem is you need to have all your devices from Apple. So Apple wants you to have all Apple devices. It may not be an iPhone 6s, an iPad, or a Mac. But it's not the same with Android. In Android, syncing data does not require you to have any specific device. You can take photographs on an iPhone like I have here, and you can upload those photographs to Google Photos, and you can see them on any device, may that be a Windows or a Mac or an iPad or an Android device itself. So that's quite good and quite easy and convenient too. Next, let's go on to differences between both these platforms as to what are the main differences which you can easily see in these devices, and what differentiates you from an Android device and from an iOS device. So the most basic thing that we can see in differentiation is the keyboards. iOS keyboards are quite simple and they do not do much. You can just you gotta physically type on each and every key, and that's it. While in comparison to that, on an Android platform, your keyboards have much more facilities to make it easier for you to type faster and more accurately. Like for example, you can use the Flow keyboard to swipe words to type quickly. Similarly, you can even use the basic keyboard if you want to, and there are single-handed keyboard options too that transforms the whole keyboard onto one angle, and you can type through single-handedly instead of trying to spread your whole finger towards the whole keyboard. That's much more difficult. That's an option that's only on Android and that's not on the iOS devices. Similarly, when we talk about messages, to be specific, the application that's provided in iOS devices is just one single platform, that is messages itself, and it has got lots and lots of features. One of the main features being the iMessage option, wherein you can talk with similar iPhone users, and it has lots and lots of options within that specific group of iMessaging people who have iPhone. You can have a lot of features to talk with them with, but you cannot do the same with usual messages. And all these messages, iMessages or messages, are synced to your Mac or to your iPad. When we talk about messages on Android, it's much more complex and much more confusing, because like for example, in the last I/O, Google launched Allo and Duo. Allo being a messaging application which just is not the singular option on Android. You have Allo, you have Google Hangouts, which has been there for quite some time, and you have Messenger. It's a separate application which was launched by Google just 1 or 2 years ago with its Nexus devices. So Google's Android platform is much more confusing when we talk about the messaging applications, as Google has kept developing different applications, and is not sticking to one specific application. So you have different features. You have much more features in comparison to messages on iPhone in an Android platform, but they are in different applications, so it's quite confusing. Now, when we talk about camera, both the platforms, when we talk about the software and cameras, both platforms have a very simple application, and the features are quite similar. But when we talk about using the manual mode, which usually people who use DSLRs love the most, those features are available more on the Android devices than in an iOS device. iOS devices are mainly just to focus and click. They just do not have that many options of editing photographs while taking them using manual modes. Next is, let's talk about the assistants. So iPhones have something called Siri, and Android device has something called Google Now. Now Google Now is synced with the Google search, so you can understand how big database it has got with Google search. Now Siri is much more smaller in comparison to its data, but Siri can make calls for you, it can send texts for you, can read emails for you, can send emails for you, can tell you the weather for you. But there is a limitation of tasks that Siri can do, and Google Now can do much more than what Siri can do, as it is much more developed and it is still developing, and Google is much ahead in terms of its assistant in comparison to Apple through its Siri. Finally, let me give a brief about the overall softwares. So Google works on RAM. So every time you see a Google device, people talk about specifications more. In specifications, people talk about the RAM the most. Why? Because Google's software has layers in it. Google makes a software, and we call it Android. And on Android, different brands like Samsung or HTC or Huawei or any other brand for that sake adds its own skin. So that's a layer. So on top of that, there are layers which are put in by different carrier companies. So there are almost 3 or 4 layers which the RAM has to run. That's why Android devices need more RAM to run their softwares smoothly. But in comparison to that, iPhones do not need any RAM of that sort, simply because Apple just has one layer of its softwares, and iPhones have to run just that specific layer. And that's why it does not need that many RAMs to run their operations smoothly. This is the main difference in Android and in iOS. Stay tuned, and thank you for being with me and seeing my video. Please subscribe. Peace.